those are the questions that I've addressed in my career, most of which has been overseas in conflict areas. I was in the Balkans for about a dozen years in every conflict area there was. I had shorter missions in Iraq, in Afghanistan, in Haiti, and a very memorable mission in Pakistan where I met with Benazir Bhutto, had a 90-minute meeting with her in Peshawar less than 24 hours before she was tragically killed, which really changed the course of that country's history and our relations with Pakistan. The first thing about conflict is to remember just how devastating it is. It's the human cost is obvious. What is less obvious is to understand the self-perpetuating nature of conflict. When a country devolves into open fighting, when there are grievances that can only be resolved to resort to arms, it has a self-propelling nature. There's a great quote from a Houthi fighter in Yemen who says this: "After what they did to my family, I can never forgive them." And you can imagine just how difficult it will be to have peace in Yemen. So the other thing is to consider the consequences. In Syria, no one ever thought that it would affect politics in Europe, that the migration to Europe would drive the instability in the continent, make people resent migrants, and introduce the populism and nationalism into Europe, which was on the course of a new era of European Union unity and democracy. So the cost of conflict, we must always bear in mind, is extremely serious and in some ways even incalculable. We've intervened in several countries, and typically the intervention has been successful in a narrow military sense. If you look at Iraq, Afghanistan, even Libya, widely cited as a failure, the intervention itself was successful. The real challenge, of course, is the aftermath. And here, the major lessons that we've learned, of course, is that security is critical. There has to be a plan for security. President Obama, to his credit, acknowledged one of his major regrets was not having a solid plan for security in Libya. So this was also the problem under Bush in Iraq, was after Saddam Hussein was deposed, not having a plan. So security is very clear. The other point is, people often say this, that we have to involve the local population. This is the term of ownership. In my view, this is quite against the prevailing view. I think ownership is overrated, and I wrote an article to this effect in SAIS Review. In my view, the most important thing in a post-conflict situation is not ownership. It's not ownership. The most important thing in a post-conflict situation is to prevent the parties from fighting again. And in many respects, the most irresponsible thing anyone can do is to simply say to the parties, well, you have to deal with this yourself. You have to take ownership. War itself was the proof that peaceful means of bargaining, peaceful mechanisms had broken down. The trust is broken. The sense of grievance is very palpable. So it can be very destructive, counterproductive to simply say we have to give ownership. It has to be a mix. We have to think carefully about what is driving this conflict, what are the grievances, and how can we help the parties build institutions that will set up a mechanism for them to resolve their grievances without resort to arms.